Before we get started, just a reminder that today's episode is not to be taken as financial advice. Everyone's situation is unique, so we encourage you to speak with a financial advisor regarding your own situation. Cool, let's get stuck in. Hello and welcome to It's No Secret podcast. I'm Christine and today we're back with part 2 of our financial plan episodes where my partner Ollie and I are put in the hot seat and are working through a financial plan with James Blair, Wealth Director and Financial Advisor at Lighthouse Financial. He's also a co-host of podcast Checks and Balances. Today we're going to give a bit of an overview of the financial plan that James has put together for us, plus chat through updates and goals and actions that Ollie and I have taken since our first episode, plus how we'd like to move forward with our finances. So a little bit of context, as I said, it has been quite a while since we recorded the first episode, and in that time we've met with James off screen to chat through the changes that have been made as well as life happening. So I'll give you a bit of an overview as to what we talked about in the first episode. We ran through our short, medium and long-term goals. So for Ollie and I, that was saving for travel, a potential wedding and possibly a ring, or hopefully a ring that goes with that. Medium-term goals to travel for an extended period of time and potentially move overseas in the medium future. As well as long-term goals, just have generally enough money to retire. We were a bit vague on that. And then we had this sort of side goal, which was the option to invest in private equity, which we were considering. And we even chatted about potentially borrowing money to invest that. So updates and what has happened since that point. Ollie and I, who I should also probably welcome. Hi, Ollie.
Hi.
Sitting off screen. We have committed to investing a bit more money than we had expected into the private equity because basically we felt like that was a really good option that didn't come around very often. So we both ended up selling some funds and moving that money from one type of growth asset to another type of high growth asset. So money's still invested for the long term. The wedding costs have been postponed a little bit, and that is in part because everyone that we know got engaged in the last 2 months, and so they all want to have international weddings. That means our money needs to go towards going to their weddings instead of having our own. We did also get a quote for a ring, which we will talk about. Another update is that Ollie has moved from Simplicity Growth Fund with his KiwiSaver to the Kernel High Growth Fund. And have you changed the amount you're contributing?
No.
So I have increased it from 3 to 6%. So yeah, more money is going to my retirement or potential house in future. And we have been overseas since we last spoke. So we spent a bit of our extra cash on that, as well as we really saw the value of having insurances. So quick overview, our baggage got lost and basically had to go through the nightmare of claiming our expenses to make up for those lost baggage. So it really has validated the need to have insurances and things like that. So before I continue to hog the mic, I'm going to throw it over to you, James, just to give a bit of an overview as to, I guess, the discussions that we've had off screen after the first episode in terms of the plan that we worked on or the recommendations that you provided based on our goals.
Cool. Thank you. Great to be back. It's been a while since the first time we had this discussion, and
yes,
quite a bit has changed all round. I've now got a 3-month-old son.
Yes.
And
congrats again.
Thank you. Didn't have a son then.
Yes, true.
So we've sent you your plan, you've gone through it, and then we've made some changes off the back of it. Mm-hmm. The big thing with a plan, which most likely spoke about in the first episode, is that it is not about you should invest, like I have some money to invest in, I should invest into this thing. Yeah. We start with your goals first always, because it completely depends on what you want. And one of the things we identified last time was you had pretty much, you guys want it all, which, you know, everybody wants it all. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes. But you have quite a few short-term goals, quite a few longer-term goals. Yeah. So it's all about how do we split money into both having enough cash, but also thinking about where else we should be investing our money. Mm-hmm. One thing we didn't talk about last time we recorded was about your investing in shares versus potentially investing into property. Mm-hmm. And we had quite a long discussion. Mm-hmm. And Christine, I don't want to say I dragged you kicking and screaming, but quite a long discussion about whether you should buy a house or not. Yeah. And we ran through some numbers which are in the plan. So first time around, you had a lot more cash, and now you've allocated a lot of the cash. Yeah. So first time around, we were talking about how we wanted to leave quite a bit of cash for short-term goals, which was a combination of we were looking at
Travel,
engagement,
yeah.
wedding, and also travel. So those three components together mean we had to leave a considerable amount of money in cash. But then there was this kind of longer term piece and where we wanted to invest. So the first piece was we did a comparison on your KiwiSavers, and Ollie, it was particularly with your KiwiSaver between the Simplicity Growth Fund and the Kernel High Growth Fund.
Yes.
And talking about probably the difference in fee structure, but most importantly, how the tax on the KiwiSavers are treated overseas and tax leakage. If you have a really low fee, but then you're losing money somewhere else, doesn't really work out. So that's why we recommended you move from the Simplicity High Growth Fund to the Kernel High Growth Fund. So I'm quite keen. So essentially, you've told me that buying a house at some point in the future is something that's important to you. Now, not everybody has to have an owner-occupied home. We did an episode recently on Checks and Balances where we talked about like if you rented your whole life and a different way to invest, but you've said at some point in the future, owning your own home is important to you. So we've run the numbers and essentially think you're going to be quite a bit, like over $100,000 better off in 10 years buying now opposed to waiting for a while, investing into shares. So we did a direct comparison, and I think that was speaks for itself. It's just
There's other factors around it as well.
Other factors, and it's a big step for you, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think one reflection that we made was, I guess, me personally not resisting so much to this idea of property because it does have merits in the same way that investing in shares do and investing in businesses and things like that. I think it takes a bit of time for me personally to get around it, and then also it's more the timeline of which we're very murky on. Like it's something we do want to do, we just don't really know when that is. Would that be fair, Ollie?
That would be very fair. But we also know that there is a bit of a runway to actually getting to that point where we have the deposit ready and changing just our risk allocation, I guess, to how we actually need to have cash on hand for a potential deposit.
Yeah, your asset base with quite a lot in shares would need to look completely different to be able to make that work. And then it's also like you've got like a lot of your shares, I'm sure, are down at the moment. And you're like, I don't really want to sell them at a loss and crystallize losses. But then there's the flip side of, well, if you're selling at something that's at a loss and you're investing into something that's at a loss, how do those two things come together? Yeah,
exactly. That was exactly my point. I think it's getting comfortable with the idea of owning a home and then getting comfortable with the ideas of like cashing investments out as well to then put into one asset, which is probably just a work in progress, basically.
Yeah, and with the shares versus property, just to be clear, pound for pound, shares are a better investment than property. They've delivered higher returns and they're more diversified, and property can be a huge pain in the backside. The real benefit of property is leverage. So if you have $100,000 and you get a 10% return on shares, but then you take off tax, fees, and inflation, on the $100,000 you might have made, I don't know, $2,000-$3,000 like as a net real return. On property, let's forget about inflation because inflation can get confusing with property. Let's say you made like $7,000 after tax, but if you had $100,000 you put as a deposit to buy property, and that $1 million asset, because you got a 10% deposit, goes up 5%, that's $50,000 in capital gains. Now, it's not black and white. It's very complicated because there's a rent, whether it's an investment property or an owner-occupied, the cost, the maintenance, the rates, the insurance, they all need to be taken into the equation. But in your situation, I think the numbers stack up that property is a very viable option for you.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Love it. So what else did we talk about in this great plan?
Yeah. So quite clear that you're keen to spread your wings and spend a little bit of time overseas.
Yeah.
Not sure exactly what that looks like, but most likely like a couple of month trip overseas.
Yeah.
And we need to save some cash between now and the time that happens, which, what are we thinking, like maybe a year and a bit, 18 months, something like that. Yeah.
Gives us enough time to save.
Yeah. And so we need to have enough cash set aside. Yeah. So sometimes people want all of their money being invested, so you feel like you're going forward, but if you've got short-term goals, that can end up in tears. So we really need to build up our cash reserves to make sure you can just enjoy that and live your best life and not have to worry about my investments have dropped in value.
Yeah. We also talked about, I guess, the threshold with emergency funds in terms of like, you felt like we didn't have enough based on our expenses. And I agree with that. I guess I'm happy to have less personally, but we appreciate that we probably should have more if we're going to have enough of a buffer to even cover our daily expenses today.
And a proper emergency that may arise.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's two components. There's the short-term goals,
Mm-hmm.
so that's the cash, and then also the reserves on top of that for the emergency.
Yeah.
But then you add it all up and that's a hell of a lot of money in cash. But
Yeah.
it's just your situation at the moment.
Yeah.
And you would have thought 2 years down the line, your
Yeah.
need for cash is going to, depends how long the wedding, how far into the future the wedding is. But 2
At
years...
this rate, it's going to be like 10 years.
Wouldn't be the first one.
Ouch.
Yeah. But in 2 years' time, you would have thought you'll need to have so much money in cash would kind of pull back.
Yeah. Well, and also I think, given the rise of interest rates that we've seen, you can make money by having your money in a cash plus fund or in a term deposit or things like that, because the interest rate is higher. So it's not like you're earning nothing. It's just, I guess, the level of risk around that money.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely. And then so we spoke about the overseas experience part. We spoke about the property. We spoke about your short-term goals and long-term goals.
Mm-hmm.
Then we did some projections over 10 years. And in very big, bold words, I said, these projections are going to be wrong because there's so many bloody variables in your situation that...
Yeah.
But it's more about motivating you to see that with small, consistent steps over time, how quickly you can build wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And we pretty much saw that between where you are now and in 10 years' time, you can, if you're consistent, you can add north of $1 million in total assets over that period, which is a very cool number.
Sounds great.
Let's
Better
sign
not
up.
dip into those auto saves.
And that was a combination of an owner-occupied home, a mortgage, Kiwi savers, private equity, and also, there's potentially talking about investment property down the road and those sort of things.
Yeah, cool.
And then we did talk a bit about insurance. So I believe that your biggest assets are your income and your ability to earn.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be crazy not to put insurance in place. Mm-hmm. Now, when you go see an insurance advisor, the problem with insurance advisors is they have a natural conflict between the more insurance they give you, the more money they get paid, which means that a lot of Kiwis end up being overinsured. Mm-hmm. The other thing that happens is they get paid most of their money up front. So they give you some insurance and then just leave it, and then you end up, your insurance needs to change over time.
Right.
For you, we were just looking at like a really basic introductory insurance package, which will change over time based on kids, mortgages, all that kind of stuff down the track. Mm-hmm. But pretty much we were just looking at insuring 75% of your income, having a 13-week stand-down period on the insurance. That's important because a 3-month stand-down period is half the price of a 4-week stand-down period. So that's why the emergency fund is important. Mm-hmm. And a benefit period of 5 years. Most people insure their income till age 65, but this is a cost thing and just to make it reasonable. And some insurance is better than no insurance. And then in addition to that, we did $50,000 of life insurance for each of you and a $50,000 lump sum if you had like a significant medical event. Mm-hmm. And that was about $50 a fortnight. And then we had 5 different providers we looked at and recommended one for you.
That was $50 for both of us in a fortnight
Combined.
as well. Yeah,
Yep.
So $25 each per fortnight, which isn't that bad when you think about what the potential upside of that is.
It was actually less than what I thought it was going to be. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
And the cost was something that had previously put us off, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, less I rant about insurance advisors, the better. Granted, technically you would argue I'm an insurance advisor, but I like
But
to
the
say I'm
good
a
kind.
financial planner. Yeah. It's like no, but you can trust me, I'm a good one. So like, that sounds dodgy. And then in a plan, nothing works perfectly. There are risks and disadvantages to lots of things you do. Mm-hmm. So we have a whole page where we run through those, talks about wills, power of attorneys, and disclosures. So we've sent you your plan, we talked through it originally, and then some time has gone by and some things have changed.
Yes. Yeah, so as we mentioned earlier, things have changed, but I'm keen to hear, Ollie, hot seat. Do you have any reflections, I guess, you want to share on that plan and I guess what has changed since then?
think it was an eye-opener because I'm quite a number-based person, so I look at things quite in quantitative terms, where I can see like, oh, if I save at this rate, I'm going to have this amount of money in 10 years' time. But I think it was having everything laid out in front of me, seeing numbers, seeing different scenarios, and also seeing how the whole kind of picture was forming, as opposed to just almost cherry-picking certain parts, was actually a really valuable experience.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. And I would say that's a misconception with a plan as well. Like a lot of the time it's, I don't know anything about money, so somebody who knows something about money take advantage of it.
Yeah.
But really, if you are switched on, then I mean you're just in as need of a plan, because you can talk about like having an independent person to talk about what's going on, the different things it's thinking about in my mind, and having a financial plan in terms of the cost. It's not about going like, I can make an extra 1% return on like a fund or anything. I mean, Colonel's whole thing, right, is about being in the markets, and I think the stats are the stats around that. It's more if you can't claw back the costs and 10x it on not making stupid decisions and understanding all of your options and making the right decisions and having the accountability, that's where the value is in the plan.
Yeah,
and also finding that balance between like, we want to live our best life now but be okay in the future, and how do you work out what that balance is?
Yeah, definitely. And like accountability, I think, is a big one as well. For me personally, it's like that thing of getting a personal trainer, right? Where you need someone to hold you accountable to show up at the gym. It's the same with the finances, is having someone that objectively can call you out on your BS, basically, which has been great for me, because a reflection that, well, it's like the house thing that we were talking about before, and it's also the being realistic around, I can't say that I want it all and then like go and change the plan completely, or decide that I'm gonna start investing in saunas, or like whatever it is, like, you know, having someone to hold you accountable to those goals is important.
Yeah, saunas do have a good return on investment. Quite a large capital outlay to start with, but I'm sure we can make this work, Christine.
Oh my God, can we please build that? Yeah. I have said so many times to Ollie, I have to buy a sauna.
Yeah. I had a dude pitch me like a cold plunge business like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Were you into it? Were you like, this is like viable?
Oh, it's all about the numbers. It's like, I tell you one thing you do learn as a financial advisor is you learn so much about like different industries. Literally this morning I've talked to somebody who wants to set up a dance studio, and I've spoken to a heart surgeon this morning. So like, you just learn so much different stuff about different industries and businesses, and you can probably guess which one was more profitable out of the two.
But that might take a huge upfront cost, I'm sure.
But I don't have a sauna in my portfolio yet, Christine, so there is
side
a spot open.
Love it. Okay, so that's where we landed with the plan, and then as we said earlier, we've gone and done the private equity thing. We have said that we're keen to do the insurance, and we've also agreed that we need more cash reserves. So what are we working on now in terms of like, where's the plan at?
Yeah, so your cash reserves, sometimes with a plan we go and do like 10 things at once, and we're like, right, we're off to the races.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, you guys have to do these 2 or 3 things and then come back to me in a year. Yeah. And I would say you're more in the second category, that you've made some big decisions recently, right? Yeah. And you need to now, when we talk about these short-term goals, you can't achieve your short-term goals right now because you've used a lot of your cash, so you need to build back up the reserves. So if we look at your how much you regularly save, because we did the state of play section with your income, your expenses, and the amount left over, that it looks like it'll take you the better part of a year to save up the amount of cash you need to save up to make sure that you're in the position to go and do all the things you need to do short term. So cool. that would be the first thing that's changed. Yeah,
cool. And then, so let's go short term. What about the medium term? And this leads perfectly into this kind of conversation around property, really. Big question marks around, do you buy a property before you go travelling, or potentially move overseas in the medium term, or do you do it afterwards? And I really wanted to chat about this today because I personally have had a lot of conversations with people who, you know, might be a Gen X now, or like kind of in their 40s or whatever, and they either took one of those routes, and the kind of common denominator that I've heard is that I regret not buying property before moving. I have had the odd person say like, oh, actually someone on our team said that they moved overseas and then they, without buying a property, then they saw that the property market was taking off. So then they got on the ladder while they were overseas because their incomes were high enough over there to then do that. And so, yeah, really keen to hear your thoughts on this generally, and then also understand, I guess, the implications of making those decisions.
Yep. So the biggest risk, and I'll talk more generally about like the longer OE, because I think that's quite relatable to a lot of people, is when you go overseas for an undetermined period of time, and you're not on the property ladder, if being on the property ladder is important to you at some point, and if we think about where the property market is at the moment, so it's down about 15% off its peak, you risk whatever will happen. So my general thoughts on this year is it's going to get worse before it gets better, but we don't believe in time in the markets, we believe in time in the markets. So I would say, if you're going to be overseas, and what we have seen with the property market over periods of time is it doesn't just, like the share market, doesn't increase 5% per year, kind of like spikes, then it plateaus, every once in a while it might drop, but we've seen periods of time with large increases in capital, but then it becomes like 6% over the long term. So the biggest risk you've got is an $800,000 house if you're away for people who might be away for like 3 years, is that same place might cost you $1.1 million. And there's just no way that your share portfolio, unless you're making very concentrated bets on startup companies or something, that you're going to see those levels of returns. So the biggest risk for you not being in the property market is capital gains going by you. And that will be the stories of people who, of course, in hindsight, things are so obvious. Of course, when a house was $500,000, it's now $1 million. Of course, you should have bought it at that point. But we have similar thoughts now in terms of people going to be like, oh, Christine and Ollie, didn't you get so lucky when you bought your first home? It's like, nah, all your mates were like, we're going to wait for it to drop some more. But you never know when the bottom is until hindsight, and you kind of got on with the show.
I think that also the same applies to the share markets. I think back to when I first started investing, it just happened to be at the bottom of the COVID dip.
Yeah.
And not until last year have I experienced like seeing my shares in the red. And so it is like, same theory applies to different asset class really.
Yeah. So that's one of the big, that's the main risk of you being out of the property market while you're traveling. The other benefit you've got is obviously that you could rent it out while you're away. You could have an income which would cover some of the costs, but with 6.5% interest rates, it's not going to cover all of the costs. So the big disadvantage you'll have if you do it now is you'll be carrying a mortgage. So that you don't have the same freedom. You can't walk down the street the same way as the person who's like me, kind of walking along with their back arched, carrying all this debt. You have to be.
So good.
Yeah, I know. Going to see
I've
the
never
physio and being comfortable working out. Okay, at these interest rates, this is how much we would have to top it up by. This is how much we'd have to transfer, either leave cash in the country or transfer back home, and being comfortable with those levels of top-ups and what would happen if something went wrong with the property and
manager. So you need someone in New Zealand to kind of deal with the tenants.
Right.
Yeah,
and to pay them as well for their service.
Yeah. And the other one is like maintenance costs and all of those sort of things. So it's not all rosy, especially at the moment. There are heaps of people who are being like, don't buy an investment property because interest rates are too high and your cash flow will get crushed. But when you weigh up the risks and the benefits, I think for you, being on the ladder is a better outcome.
What do you think, Ollie? What are your thoughts, reflections?
Thoughts and reflections are that it's hard to look past the rising interest rates and the noise that you see in the news and people that you talk to who all of a sudden were making money and now they're having to top up their mortgage. It's quite hard to look past that, I think, but I think us going through this process has kind of allowed us to think a little bit more long-term how we start thinking about property.
Thinking about servicing that mortgage while we're away, to your point of having enough of a cash buffer, but also are we going to have income of any degree? Are we going to be using annual leave? Like, do we have a date that we're going to have an income to start generating again? And therefore, when is that like quote unquote burden of the debt going to ease a little bit, and then also what's going to happen with interest rates. That's probably just all the thoughts that I'm having around
And I mean, we're having a very hypothetical
Yeah.
conversation. It's really about running the numbers
Yeah.
and going like, how much would you need to top up the property by? Would it be interest only or principal and interest? Are you going to live in it? Are you going to rent it out while you're away for 2 months? Like, if you're just going to be away for 2 months and you're going to rent out the property, that seems like a bit of a pain in the backside. Your current, like I know you quite like your living situation at the moment. Would you stay living where you are and just rent it out? And then the property we look at would probably be completely different for a whole range of different reasons. But you need to get much more detailed to work out like what's the actual number. I agree, if you're having to like, if 80% of your spare cash flow is going towards a property, an investment property, and you're still renting a place, it's too high level in terms of the assumptions. And we did, like, the assumptions we ran in the plan was based on like your rent now and all those sort of things. And we still thought you'd be like $100,000 better off over 10 years. In terms of your comment about not having 100% clear like how long you travel for and what it might look like, I would say sometimes people can have like the paralysis by analysis and too many different variables and unsure what to do. While you're like, whether you travel for 2 months or maybe travel for a little bit longer than 2 months, fundamentally it's actually quite straightforward. If you're not going to travel for more than 2 months without work. So even if it was that you worked overseas for like a period of time, you're still going to have income. There's the question of what your living cost would be like in that situation, but you're still going to assume somewhere around the same sort of income that you have at the moment, which could help deal with that situation. And that's why over the next 12 months we're focused on saving cash, because that helps make all this stuff. Essentially, the savings in cash means that you're able to pay yourself an income while your employer's not paying you an income.
Yeah, definitely. I was also just thinking that if, let's say, we were to get in that situation, you would just find a job and figure it out. You'd find a way, or you'd decrease what you were spending, or you would stop traveling. Like, worst case scenario, you move back and get a job back here, or you continue on where you started. So I feel like you kind of do what you need to at the time to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly be disappointed if I encouraged you to buy a property and my advice brought your trip short. But that's why it's just really important to like stress test things and going, in these different scenarios, would you be okay? Like, you don't want anything to get in the way of, like, reality is you're going to have more commitments as you get older, families, all that kind of stuff. You want to go and enjoy what you're thinking about doing next year, and clearly you've thought about it for a while. You wouldn't want the property to get in the way of that. You would want it to be something in the background that is kind of working away for you, that when you're ready to come back, it's there and it's done hopefully what you want it to do. Yeah,
for sure. Love it. Okay, moving on slightly. Us being nightmare clients. So what I mean by that is, I guess I'm really keen to chat about what happens when you, as a financial advisor, gets people like us coming to chat to you who have intentional goals originally, want to do all the things, change their minds every 5 minutes, then go do this other thing that was barely spoken about. Like, how does that make you feel, firstly? And secondly, how do you react to that, and how do you work with a client? I mean, we've seen how you've just done it, but general thoughts.
It's nice to be asked how it makes me feel.
You're like, you're the worst client ever.
Nah, like, you guys are easy. Plans change all the time, and you got to like think about like projections, right? The only guarantee with projections is they're going to be wrong, because firstly, all markets don't work in like a straight 5% return assumption or whatever, and your life's going to change. And you're going to go, hey, we said we'd be happy in this house. Well, we've just got pregnant with another kid, and then we're going to go and need another bedroom or whatever. Like, situations just change, and that's why plans are, here is where we are now, this is where we want to go, and you will get to the destination. It's just the way you get to the destination looks different. So in terms of all the things that you said are important to you, short-term and long-term, you'll still be able to achieve all those things. It's just a lot's going to go down between now and then. So it's not a big deal at all. Even with people who know exactly what they want. And the other thing I'd say about you is, a client who's 50 knows much more what they want I was joking to you beforehand because they're closer to death, but mainly because they just like their kids are older, they know what's important to them, while you have so many different variables about what can happen like long term. But even with clients who are, you know, a typical demographic is like 35 to 50, time poor, busy lives, all that kind of stuff. Once we show them the projections, they get clarity, which is really all the plan is knowing like what the future looks like. And then they might go, well, what if we did this other thing, or what if we dropped to 4 days a week, and that's great because you're thinking more about your situation, you're more empowered to decide what's important to you.
Yeah, for sure. I think the clarity thing has really helped us, right? Would you say, Ollie?
Totally, 100%.
How so?
It's really easy to try and plan out everything, and I think that's something where I definitely felt like I was trying to plan out all these different paths and think that James would give us our plan and that would be our plan. We are following that step by step by step. But it quite quickly came about that opportunities came up, things changed, and knowing that there's still some fundamental principles and guidelines that we have to kind of follow and apply as we're moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. I even think to us originally coming in and being like, oh, we save this amount per fortnight, and I think upon reflection I'm like, well, actually, I think my baseline is a little bit lower than what I have been working on, because I seem to be consistently dipping into that and not able to keep going with that despite it being lower than Ollie's. And so it's kind of made me reflect on also how we're projecting, or like what is actually achievable and how is that going to improve over time.
Yeah,
you know?
I love that when somebody says this is how much I save. I go, cool. This is how much extra you can like invest or pay off your mortgage. And like, whoa, James, that's too big of a number. And I'm like, but you told me this is how. We're like, well, we're gonna have to relook at the budget. So that's like when you
love those saunas.
It happens all
really?
all
Okay.
the time.
That makes me feel so much better.
Yeah, everybody's. I mean, I would say only, you know, Ollie's in the 20% of people I deal with where he's very clear on where his money is going. Yes, some people might call him frugal, but I prefer the term, Ollie, know where your money is going.
I'll take it.
Yeah. And the other benefit is that like you know your situation and you may think you know like your friends' situations or whatever, but I know like 100 Ollies and Christines and have like a benchmark of and different things you'll run into and know like what the different things are you can do and why you're doing this thing and why aren't you doing this other thing. So
yeah. Oh, I could just go on about lifestyle creep forever. I was going to say, so coming back to the particular age and demographic, so do you find that it is mainly the kind of like options stage of life, i.e. like, I guess us to, I don't know, 45 maybe, that have this kind of, what do I do? What are my plans? Like changing minds every 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Is it a theme or is it just like human habits?
No, like I said, the older clients get, the less it pops up. Yeah. But I don't think it's like a, you know, Gen Z or millennials are different to the generation. I just think they're younger. And when you're younger, you have more options available to you, and you can work overseas, you can have kids, you can not have kids, you can move, you can buy a house, you can change industries you work in, and all those different variables have a big impact.
Yeah, right. Love it. Okay, cool. Well, any other last comments? I guess next steps for us from here in terms of the financial plan?
The big thing I would say is it's very easy, and when you do anything like this, you go through a process and go, oh yeah, that was kind of good, and then you just keep living your life. Yeah. It's very important that we have clear actions off the back of it. Yes. And I would say while there are lots of things that we do not know the outcome to, there are things that we can go and do today to make sure that we are taking good steps forward. So like the obvious steps forward are, I want us to make a call and I would like to determine a period of time on the property piece. Oh, yeah. So maybe it might... Oh, yep, we're doing that. So maybe... Okay. Yeah. So and to agree on that...
Internal panic.
Yeah, to agree on that period of time together. So, I mean, I think 3 months is a good period of time to
what about our cash reserves? There's no time.
Yeah, go get that Ollie mindset.
This is where we start house sitting and move out of our place.
Sorry. To determine like, what are we going like to work? I'll give you some steps to work through, and then for you to work through those steps and to come to a conclusion. Now, the other bit is when I say conclusion does not mean action. So some people get really confused going, well, you're telling me to go and do this thing tomorrow, but this thing might not be a good idea. It's if we think buying a property is the right thing for us, then we determine the period of time until we want to buy the property. I mean, this is what planning is. And that we have a clear action off the back of it. The other action is to be regularly saving up your cash reserves, so that kernel cash fund is a really good option. I just don't even know how you can get that high of an interest rate on that cash fund, but that's probably another story. So be regularly saving, and we need to get have enough cash set for your short-term goals by this time next year. And the third piece is the insurance side. So with the insurance, you say, I would like insurance, and then the insurance company decides whether they want to give you insurance, and you go through the underwriting process. So we'll fill out some application forms off camera to get that all rolling. But they're probably the three main actions. And the other thing I would say for people listening and thinking about their own situation is you don't have to do everything at once. If you can go, what are the 2 or 3 things or one thing that I can do right now? And you go and do that thing and then go, well, what's the thing I can do next? Having the long-term meaningful goals will help you stay more motivated and understand your decisions in the moment. But if you don't know what that thing is, just what are the logical steps I can take to get better and better, it'll all fall into place over time. And by doing 2 years of taking sensible steps, not knowing where you want to go, when you work out eventually where you do want to go long term, you're 2 years ahead. Yeah,
cool. I feel like I'm sitting here thinking all the things that you're telling me not to do. Of like, oh, well, but do we save towards the cash while it's the house thing and blah, blah, blah. But that's probably just to be talked about off mic, Yeah, cool. Okay, love it. I feel like that's some great actionable steps. And now we have it on the podcast and on video so everyone can hold us accountable. To do that in the next, I don't know, couple months, and then we'll check back in again. But thank you so much, James, and Ollie off screen, for your time today. Really appreciate, and off camera, really appreciate you dealing with us and coming along with us on this journey. But yeah, so everyone go check out Lighthouse Financial and Checks and Balances podcast. And how can people get in touch with you otherwise?
Yeah, just go on the website, Lighthouse Financial, have a look at what we can do. The other thing I can do, which I might be stitching myself up here, is if somebody comes and says, hey, because the cost for a financial plan is not something for everybody, so we charge $2,000 for a financial plan. Somebody might be like, I'm not in a situation where I can do that, and sometimes we do payment plans and those sort of things. But if you just want to spend 15 minutes talking to me about, I've got these things going on, I'm happy to have a chat. It might be that you're closer to doing the thing than you thought you were.
Cool. Love that. Awesome. Thanks, James. And we will see everyone next Tuesday. Thanks so much.